I can't help but notice that Steve Mnuchin purchased New York Community Bank, okay? He bought shares in it. He used his Liberty Capital Fund, which used Saudi money to buy New York Community Bank. And then I think, well, how rigged is the presidential election, right? Like, how really rigged is it? Is it really a fair and open election? Or is it really rigged in a way in which only very few people know who's going to be president, regardless of whatever they say the results are? Or is it really just chance and random and a fair or unfair system? And I just happen to still think that it has to be decided on by a very few people. I mean, the same way the media decides on what issues are going to be talked about that day and what issues are going to be talked about that month and that year. I mean, like, even shaping our political views and shaping our belief systems and shaping on what is accepted and what is not accepted, with this whole Israel Hamas war and Ukraine and Russia. And we don't really hear any dissenting views on TV. And really, I've always had this theory in my head now, like, where the alternative media is where the mainstream media is getting its information from. It's where it's deciding on what it wants to talk about now, because really alternative media is the tail that wags the dog. But when it comes to these bigger issues like the White House, the president, Congress, international, global issues, mainstream media still has the narrative. It still controls how people think. And it just leads me to think that if these organizations are all on the same page with a lot of things, then who's to say that they are not on the same page with the major events, like who's going to be president, who's going to be Speaker of the House, what global issues, what political issues are important to talk about, whether it be climate change or LGBTQ or racial rights and civil rights. I mean, these movements are not springing up grassroots. These things are being directed to us, and we're being told to talk about them. But, when I think about the whole Steve Mnuchin thing, and I'm like, how is this guy going to, he's going to say, like, obviously nobody wanted New York Community Bank. I mean, that's the only conclusion I can come to. Nobody wanted it. It's up to its nose in multifamily restricted rents in New York, and it's not able to raise rents, so it's not going to be able to refinance what it needs to stay afloat. And nobody wanted it. I mean, if somebody wanted it, people would have stepped in weeks ago, months ago, a year ago. I mean, at some price. I mean, even yesterday when the stock was tanking to $1.80 a share, on one hand, it seemed uncontrolled because it was, nobody wanted in. I mean, I'm sure this bank tried to court Goldman Sachs and HSBC and, all the banks around the world. I'm sure they tried to get, if they thought they needed only a certain amount of money, they would have stayed with they would have raised the money themselves, and they would have saved their own company. I mean, they could have done some type of deal, whether a broker deal with another investment bank, private equity group. Somebody would have stepped in. But the fact that nobody wanted to step in, and they allowed the stock to literally sink yesterday to $1.80 a share, means that nobody wanted this thing. That it was bankrupt. And the fact that so the move yesterday was uncontrollable. I mean, because that was the moment of panic. If you looked at the intraday chart yesterday, that was a moment of panic. I mean, I think it went from $3 something to $1.80 in about a half hour. So the move was accelerating. You know, unlike other days where the stock would just gap down and then float higher and get some type of news behind it. They had no news yesterday. So it leads me to think that as uncontrollable and unpredictable and natural the move was down, the idea that he came in and he stepped in as some white knight in the middle of the day is super suspect, super sus. So you have to think at this point, okay, he's using his Liberty Capital, but using Saudi money. When he was Treasury, Trump's administration was very pro-Israel, pro-Saudi Arabia, very friendly. That whole Sunni religious banking cartel that benefits no matter what, regardless of the relationship with Israel. But remember, they were cozying up. So whatever Trump and Mnuchin and Pompeo, whatever his name was, and all of them that they were doing to build that relationship was working. So now Mnuchin is now an investor himself, and he is using Saudi or Middle East money to make this investment. Well, I think unlike his IndyMac investment, which he did back in 2008, 2009, this one is beyond repair. Because this one, unlike IndyMac, does not have the cooperation of the government just yet. So there's still equity risk, in my opinion. And, you know, even when I heard his explanation,